30 blocks along the bayous versus someplace else. I mean, we haven't had any indication of that. That's like the lower Ninth Ward, for example. If officials know you have a low-lying area, should there be an emergency plan to evacuate the low-lying areas?
Griff, let me jump in. Griff, I'm going to jump in for you. Let's let these lovely people go. They don't have that answer. I'm sure those are the questions that they're going to want to have answers to as well. Let's this lady get to safety. You and I and Eric will continue talking for a little bit more here. And Griff,
that's an issue. There will be an issue and will be asked. Because if you look at the map of Houston, you've got these water canals that just overflow, and those neighborhoods and areas were not evacuated.
Right, indeed.
Yeah, it's actually a good point and a good thing to, I'm not sure she had the answer, but it is a good point to bring up, because that bayou, as I mentioned, along that Braeswood Road that I was on, parallel to it is the Buffalo Bayou, and
this is Brent's hometown. He's from Meyerland.
The most difficult, according to our volunteer boat captain, the most difficult area, as I described earlier, to get into. So perhaps, knowing that when they crested, and just to note, every single bayou and river has indeed crested. Guys, back to you.
Thank you. We have to take a break. We'll be back.
Where can you find more shrimp with more flavor?
Each other, Houston coping with a disaster of epic proportions. It's being called unprecedented, beyond anything experienced. Its impact unknown, says the National Weather Service, describing what is happening at this hour there in blunt and stark terms. You're looking live at the historic flooding swamping Houston and surrounding areas as emergency crews are racing to rescue those who are stranded by the water that is rising and sundown approaches in less than 2 hours. Hello and welcome back. I'm Eric Shawn. This is America's News Headquarters.
And I'm Marthel Neville. More than 2,000 desperate calls going out for help, with reports of people trapped on their roofs and in their attics. The National Weather Service saying the total rainfall from Harvey.
Calls to the 911 services here between 10 p.m. Saturday night and 1 p.m. today on Sunday. Now we are late in the afternoon, and you just see hundreds of rescues taking place. The Houston Search and Rescue teams, volunteers bringing their own boats, bringing them scores and scores and scores of home in this southwest neighborhood of Meyerland, where people are trying to get out before yet another day of historic rain and desperate conditions. The authorities still pleading with people, do not call 911 unless you have a life-threatening situation. You see this gentleman who's being rescued. I just can't stress enough that the situation here requires cooperation with officials. No matter why we got here or how we got here, this is one of, if not the most historic and worst flood disasters to hit Houston. And now we see the goodwill of volunteers and the hard work and dedication and sacrifice of the Houston law enforcement trying to do everything they can to save the day. Back to you, Eric.
All right, Griff, thanks. With the inspiring look at the best of the law enforcement officials and volunteers helping each other.
Yeah, the worst of times are bringing out the best in many Americans. From coast to coast, government agencies and private companies are pitching in to help.
I find it really interesting that the Meyerland area of Houston is being shown on the news, and apparently there's a bayou that runs right. Actually, it's an interesting story how I lived in Texas for 3 years, in Brent's hometown, because I'm not from Texas. I was born in Miami, Florida, and I've spent most of my life in Florida, but I married a Coast Guard man, and as a result of being married to him, I've lived in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Houston, Texas, Charleston, South Carolina. I think I might have missed some, but then I divorced him in 2001, and I've been in Florida since then. But it's an interesting story how I ended up in Houston. In 1991, when Brent Spiner called me on the phone and made love to me on the phone, and I recognized him as my mystery phone caller, that's when our long distance relationship started, and we were in love with each other, even though I was a married woman. But even though when he asked to come over, I said, no, I can't, because it wouldn't be right. That was one of the hardest things I ever did, to turn him down. But I was a very devout Christian, going to church like 3 times a week, a Baptist church in Seattle, and I couldn't disgrace Jesus' name. And being a Bible college graduate too, so I turned him down, even though I wanted. He turned me on so much that I was basically dreaming about making love to him. He has this velvet voice on the telephone. It's like, he's such a good singer, and when he's got this velvet tenor voice when he talks to you on the phone, and he puts so much feeling in his words to me, and it was like, I was just, he was the total opposite of my husband at that time, who, when I kissed him, it was like kissing the wall. And then Brent with his velvet voice on the phone and his longings. Oh, that guy really turned me on. I mean, really, really, really. He would just turn me on, and I felt like I was having an orgasm right there on the phone. He's got a really sexy voice. I'm just telling you. And they're trying to tell me that was at first though, I thought it was a rapist. So I hung up on him. I mean, a phone rapist. I mean, he didn't actually rape me, but so I hung up on him. But I figured out it was him when my Christian friend sent me his album, Yellow Eyes is Back. I wasn't even planning on buying it because I thought it was sinful rock music at that time. I thought rock music was sinful. But when I listened to the word, I thought, oh my God, that person who's been making love to me on the phone is Brent Spiner. So I wrote him a letter at Paramount through his fan mail and told him I figured out you're the one who's been making love to me on the phone. And all of a sudden my phone would just start ringing off the hook, and I'd pick it up and there'd be nobody there. And it was him. He was letting me know, you figured me out. It was me. My husband was going out to sea for half the year. So during that time, when my husband was out to sea, and he would know because I'd tell him in the letters. You say, oh, it's an imposter. Well, if it was an imposter, they were definitely reading whatever I was sending to Brent at his fan mail address. That's all I got to say. They were snooping into his fan mail because whoever was calling was obviously responding to what I was writing at Brent Spiner's fan mail at Paramount. It was Brent. I have no doubt about it. Anyways, so to make a long story short, I prayed to God about this. I was angry at God. I said, God, why have you given me such a cold, emotionally abusive husband? And then my dreamboat, a millionaire celebrity, falls in love with me. I didn't really care about his money. In fact, I didn't even know whether he was a millionaire or not. I was kind of a dodo bird about Hollywood because in the 1920s, I didn't even watch television. I thought television was a sin. So, I mean, not 1920s, when I was in my 20s. So anyways, what was really strange is we had revival services going on right at the time when Brent was making phone calls. Coincidence or not? No. And as a result of going to those revival services, Jesus actually spoke to me during the revival where people were going up there and confessing all their sins. And Jesus was saying, Gail, this is part of my plan. Brent is part of my plan for you. And during the revival, he told me, he said, I don't want you to go to him. And you're doing the right thing to turn him down for sex. But I want you to be his friend. He's part of my plan for your life. And he needs you right now. And I want you to support him as your friend, as your long distance friend. So I kept my friendship with him, even though my husband threatened to divorce me. And I believe I was following God's will. Now, what was really interesting, what happened is I turned him down for sex, though he did come to my apartment one time in December 1993, and I saw him out there in the car, and I saw him inside the car. He actually came to my apartment. Right after that, that's when Loree and her lawyers got really mad at Brent for daring to do that. And 1 month later, I got a FedEx from a Paramount female attorney claiming it was really complicated. My husband had written a letter to Paramount threatening Brent Spiner with bad press. And I was so ashamed of my husband back then. But that's why we got the letter from the lawyer at Paramount. Well, my husband was a Jesuit, And Brent Spiner's fake girlfriend, Loree McBride, was a Jesuit, though at that time I didn't know about Loree till 1996. But anyways, to make a long story short about Houston, okay, so 1991 in Seattle, he was calling me to my Seattle phone number, and I lived in Linwood, Washington at that time, and that's when my relationship with Brent started. Guess what was our next duty station after Seattle? In 1993, I think that was the year I transferred from Seattle to Houston. Yes, yes. God transferred me to Brent Spiner's hometown. You may think, oh, that's just a coin. Well, I asked David, I didn't tell David. My ex did not know that Brent was in my life at that time. I kept it a big secret to protect Brent. But I asked, David said that out of about 120 possible duty stations, he got Galveston, Texas. I thought, oh, Jesus, if that's not a sign that he's part of my life, what is? So Jesus stationed me in Brent Spiner's hometown. So I said, I'm going to take advantage of this. I'm going to write. I was a writer. I just started writing in 1991. I took a course with the Institute of Children's Literature, and Jim Murphy was my teacher. He's an award-winning children's writer. So I thought, wow, what an opportunity. I am going to set my novel in Brent's hometown. And my main character was Brent anyways. And that's how I ended up going to Braeswood Boulevard. I would drive out. It was like a 45-minute drive. I lived in the Friendswood I lived in Alvin for a year. Then I moved, that's in Brazoria County. Then I moved to Harris County. I think it was Harris County. Yeah, Harris County. And I lived in the Clear Lake area of Houston. That's the southeastern eye of Houston. And I lived in near Friendswood. I hear Friendswood is getting some flooding right now too. So I would drive, I drove from Friendswood to southwest Houston. It was about a 45-hour drive. I would take the, I think they call it the Gulf Freeway. Then I'd go on to 610 and go west. They have a 610 loop that goes all around Houston, and the 610 would take me right out. Then I'd get off at the Braeswood Boulevard exit, and I would park my car, and that's the Meyerland area where Brent Spiner grew up, and I'd park my car and just walk around and take notes as a writer of what I smelled, using all my senses, what I heard, what I smelled, what I felt, what I saw, and I used that in scenes for my novel, Silver Skies. And I have a link underneath this video where you can read some of the scenes that I have in Silver Skies. I also had a flood scene in Silver Skies. So Jesus said that I inspired you to write that novel, and he loves that book. In fact, Steven Spielberg has made a movie from it starring Matthew McConaughey as my lead, Dorvan Habakkuk. So I set Silver Skies with many areas. There were a lot of scenes in Houston and a lot of scenes in Seattle. I made it so that my female lead was from Seattle and my male lead was from Houston, and the female lead was kind of patterned after me, and the male lead was kind of patterned after Brent Spiner. And I had a Rachel character in there who was kind of patterned after Loree McBride, though what's ironic is that I didn't know about Loree McBride until 1996. So I made up this character, and I found out later she's a lot like Loree McBride. I knew that there was some evil woman in Brent's life. I just kind of sensed it. My emotional IQ is very high. So anyways, there's a Loree McBride, I believe, is behind Hurricane Harvey in Houston. And all these scenes from Braeswood Boulevard, I'm thinking, wow, that's where I went to do research. Brent Spiner grew up in Meyerland, Texas. He went to Bel Air High School in Bel Air, which is kind of just north of Meyerland. It's in the southwest area of section. That whole area is just being flooded out right now, I think. And Brent was there about 2 weeks ago, living in an apartment in Houston, trying to hide from Loree McBride because she was attacking him while he was on the Jesuit spaceship. So he thought he'd be safer on Earth. Or right now, I think he's safer up on the spaceship. So anyways, it's just amazing. Loree McBride is horrible. She has sent Harvey to Houston. I think she's trying to entice Brent to go down to Houston to try to rescue his hometown. But it's not a coincidence that this stuff's happening in his hometown, folks. And I'm just telling you, this is really wild.